The Kenosha riots turn into a war zone. Will Democrats pay a price for this lawlessness? A critical update in the George Floyd case, and RNC Night 2 coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show. As soon as I saw the first video clips, it was clear what had happened last night. It was obvious, and it was expected. You had the continued rioting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, not a place that people usually think of as being full of not only rioters, but now increasingly it looks like urban warfare going on. But the BLM movement thinks that it is going to achieve justice by burning down businesses, attacking courthouses, throwing rocks at cops, all the stuff that we've seen. You know, the Democrat Party has a very large, a very considerable megaphone at its disposal when it chooses to use it. We know this because they can, for example, create a massive lie about Russia collusion and get almost half the country to believe it. So just imagine what they could do. Imagine the role they could play in calming things down if they're willing to come forward and roundly condemn this madness for what it is, which is just the rage of the left-wing mob. That's what we see happening here. All right, people who are MSNBC and CNN watchers or spend too much time reading the HuffPost or the New York Times or whatever their local newspaper is. I'm sure there's a lot of libs writing there too. But people that have been brainwashed from the academy through university, Hollywood, and even now in corporate training sessions into believing all this craziness, they now are taking to the streets for months and ruining neighborhoods and making everything worse for everyone. But it was really just a matter of time until this started to become a lethal issue. It was just a matter of time before BLM caused people to die. Now, there were some early on deaths from the BLM movement, including David Dorn in St. Louis. Not a lot of media attention paid to any of that. But those were people that they would say, those were incidents that were just specific acts of criminality that were not related to the protest. That's what they'll tell you. It's a lie, of course, but that's what they'll say. But now what we have are street clashes between rioters and those who refuse to allow their neighborhoods, allow stores, gas stations to be burned to the ground in some act of performative Democrat rage. Do not forget, friends, and I don't care if it's repetitive, I don't care if it annoys people. These are Biden voters who are doing this. These are people who listen to Joe Biden, the Democrat Party, and mainstream media outlets. These are people who believe celebrities. They believe LeBron James. They believe Rachel Maddow on the news side. They believe these people who come forward to tell them that black men are being systematically hunted and murdered by racist cops, which is a narrative that is not only incorrect, not only wrong on the facts, it is insane. As I told you yesterday, you are more likely to be struck by lightning and killed than to be a black man who is unarmed and killed by police in this country. Considerably more, actually, by a factor of, depending on the year, at least 3 or 4 times. So you're a lot more likely to be killed by lightning. This is just how statistics work. This is just what numbers tell us. But nonetheless, this is the storyline. This is what people believe. And so we saw last night what that can mean. We saw there were individuals who were, as I understand it, legally armed. Although you don't always know, right? Someone could be a convicted felon. A felon in possession is also itself a felony. But you have people doing open carry. They've got semi-automatic rifles, and they were refusing to allow businesses to be burned down. Notice how there's never any violence that occurs with those who are trying to defend these properties. That never happens during the day. They're not going after protesters. They're not allowing rioters to pretend to be protesters so they have cover for their destructive activities. That's an entirely different thing. And that's why, as I continue to see this play out, None of this is in the least bit surprising. If we had an honest press, if we had an honest media, everybody would know that these are rioters. What they're doing is disgraceful. And the Democrat Party has now created a Frankenstein monster of a movement. I know the Frankenstein's the doctor, not the monster, but I'm saying the monster that Dr. Frankenstein created. They've got a movement here that they cannot control. Right? They don't know what to do now. They're recognizing the optics. It's quite a counter-programming decision to have riots going on in Wisconsin, rocks being thrown at cops, while the RNC is happening and people are being told that America is a great place and we love our legal immigrants and we love all the different contributions that are made, whether it's from a Cuban refugee or from our black American brothers and sisters here. I mean, just all across the board, all these messages of hope and inclusiveness and actual unity in the American dream. And then you got Democrats out there burning crap down, throwing rocks at police. And now people have died. 2 shot, dead, 1 seriously wounded. And it's all available to be seen on social media. There's video of the shooting. You had, it's not, all the details around it are not entirely clear just yet. But we do know the following. There was someone with a semi-automatic rifle who was trying to prevent, it is believed, trying to prevent the rioters from burning down a gas station. And then a group of people rush at a gunman and they try to hit him and attack him. If you run at somebody with a semi-automatic rifle and try to fly kick him and hit him with a skateboard and you get shot, what are we supposed to think about that? Do these, costume play, make-believe revolutionaries that are Democrats, MSNBC watchers, do they not understand that when somebody has a gun and if you attack them, there's an elevation of force that's going to happen immediately because they have to be thinking, what if they turn the gun on me? So even if, as you assault somebody who has a rifle, you think, well, I'm not trying to kill this person. I'm just trying to mess him up. They're not going to see it that way. They have a weapon on them that can instantly kill them if it's turned on them. So how surprised are we supposed to be that someone who is swinging a skateboard at a person gets shot and is killed? What are all of these idiots in the streets doing? What do they think they're accomplishing? What did they believe was going to happen by rushing somebody with a semi-automatic rifle? That he was just not going to use it? It's a very dangerous game they played, and unfortunately, a couple of people seem to have lost. What a waste. What a waste and a disgrace on top of it. There's no reason for this to happen. Now the narrative we were told, the story that was initially shared here, that the man who was initially killed that set this whole thing off was trying to break up a fight, that it turns out was not true. Now we're told increasingly it's not the case that, first of all, we should never believe. We should never think it's true what the media first tells us. But he wasn't trying to break up a fight. Jacob Blake, 29 years old, she's not killed, but he was shot and paralyzed. That wasn't true. I want to know, was there a gun in his car? That's a critical piece of information. The pressure. I haven't seen any confirmation one way or the other. Did he have a weapon in the car? We should know that one way or the other. I don't know, but we should know that. That's not hard to figure out. But of course, the full video wasn't released. It was an edited version of it, right? Edited to change the context, to change our understanding of events. All videos, you could argue, in some way are edited. And now we see what that leads to. I do believe, finally, the Democrats are recognizing that their decision to turn Kenosha into Fallujah isn't going to play well with Wisconsin soccer moms in November. I think they understand that. They're starting to see that they can't play this, what riots game much longer. No, we see who the Democrats are. We see what they're willing to do to get their way going into this election. And they have blood on their hands. The fancy TV news anchors who pretend that Black Lives Matter is not a Marxist group that seeks to undermine and destroy this country and set us against each other. All of the corporations that were sending the huge payoffs, the cowardice around this issue has been truly jaw-dropping. It's stunning. Oh, BLM. People in the beginning, I even hear Republican politicians all the time, the legitimate concerns. What are the legitimate concerns of BLM? Well, what are they? The foundation of BLM, the foundational story is a lie. That white cops kill black men, unarmed black men, constantly, systematically, and without consequence because they're racist. That's a lie. And we keep seeing this. Mike Brown, hands up, don't shoot, a lie. I'll get into the big update on George Floyd in a little bit, but get ready for more riots there too, folks. What do they think is being advanced here? By having, federal harassment of law enforcement officers who are actually doing overwhelming and doing a very good job, that's going to make people safer? No, we've already run this experiment. The Democrats pretend that, whether it's Eric Holder's Justice Department or now hearing this from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, if only we had police reform, things would be better. You know what Democrat police reform is? It's having the DOJ look through everything in a police department, harass everybody, frighten everybody. They might not just lose their job, they could become a national scapegoat for racism, for something they didn't even do or that's being misconstrued. And more minorities die in the community while the police are being nagged, harassed by the federal government. That's what actually happens in these cases. They don't really tell you that. More people die, nothing is accomplished. And that's if you take them at their word that what they want is police reform. I don't think that that's really the mission of this at all. That's just the cover story. What do they really want? What are we seeing in the streets? People who are upset, people who are angry. We're talking about BLM and Antifa, people who are losers. These are not happy people. These are not the winners of our society. They're not individuals with stable, supportive family and friend relationships, with great jobs and great prospects for the future. Increasingly, you can see this. I mean, just look at the videos of Antifa and BLM. These are individuals who hate this country, who hate this society. They were screaming blank America last night and, tear America down, burn America down to the ground. They were screaming kill cops last night in Kenosha, screaming it on video. There's so much footage out there. I could play some of it for you here, except it's just a lot of bleeps and a lot of yelling. Normal, moral, well-adjusted, worthwhile people don't yell kill cops. They don't yell burn this country down. And they shouldn't be out there on the streets at all doing this stuff at night. Law and order needs to be restored. The Democrats are completely feckless and gutless when it comes to dealing with this issue. They don't know what to do. This is BLM and Antifa are like wayward family members for the Democrats. It's like when somebody has a kid in the playground that's, smashing all the other kids in the face with a shovel in the sandbox, and the parents are like, well, it's not perfect. What are you going to do? Still love my kid. Sorry. Hopefully your kid's eye's going to stay in one place, right? I mean, that's what we are dealing with this Democrat Party. They thought it would be useful, but now they realize it's a liability, and they are going to do everything they can to try to just convince people that this has nothing to do with them or it's not that big a deal. They even tried, Republicans caused it a few weeks ago. Remember that in Portland? Oh, it's because Trump set in federal law enforcement. You know what they could use right now in Kenosha? Some federal law enforcement. You know what they could use? National Guard. And I'm just going to tell you this. It's a scary thought, but it's a real one. It's true. If men in MAGA hats were burning down businesses and engaging in mob violence and intimidation on a nightly basis in any American city, the same cowards of the Democrat Party right now who either ignore or downplay what's happening would be calling for the National Guard to fire live rounds into crowds of those MAGA hat wearers. They would be demanding the use of lethal force to shut this down. You know it's true, and I know it's true. That's the mentality of the left. That's who we're really dealing with. This is a rotten ideology that is trying to ruin this country. We're not trying to negotiate with them. We need to defeat them. What does COVID-19 have to do with losing your home? Well, the FBI has reported that since COVID-19 began, cybercrime's up 75% in this country. Now, guess what? Home title theft is a cybercrime. The legal title to your home is online. Cybercriminals find the title to your home and then forge your signature on a quitclaim deed and refile as the new owner of the home. You're off the title. They destroy you by taking out loans against your home. They steal the cash and stick you with the payments. You may not know about this until you get a foreclosure notice. That's right. Home Title Lock, however, can protect you from this cybercrime. Home Title Lock creates a virtual barrier around your home's title. The usual identity theft services do not protect you. So please, first things first, go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim and don't even know it. You can also get 30 free days of protection. That's use code BUCK at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK.
This morning, get up, come down here, and what I see, I was not prepared for. I knew it was going to be a disaster, but I didn't know what a disaster looked like till I saw it.
And you, I can hear the emotion in what you're saying. I mean, what is the family feeling right now?
It's tough. This is a business that my parents started 40 years ago, small, out of their garage. It was a small business. Did it just to make a few extra dollars, and eventually it grew. 31 years ago, they bought this building, and so we've been here ever since. They're very upset about it. It's emotionally hurtful. We didn't do anything to anybody. Why did we deserve it?
It's a Wisconsin business owner up in Kenosha asking a question that I think should be posed right to every Democrat running for office in the country. Why should these business owners have their livelihoods destroyed, their lives ruined? What did they do? They didn't hurt George Floyd. They didn't hurt any of the people involved in this. Right? They didn't hurt Jacob Blake. What's the justification for this? Well, there can be no justification. It's immoral. It's wrong. It's criminal, too. And those entrusted with the power of the state are supposed to care about that. Criminal violations like this are supposed to be severely punished, not justified, not downplayed, not talked about as other part of some new civil rights movement. This is not about any of that. This is about rage. This is class warfare. This is turning envy in society and in different communities into a political weapon, and then having people take real weapons into their hands because of the rhetoric around all of it. It's appalling what's going on. And the Democrats are behind the whole thing. If this had been from the beginning shouted down on a bipartisan basis, if we had been told that this was completely unacceptable with one voice across the country, it might not have gotten off the ground quite the same way that it has. Instead, what do we see? A complete and utter disaster. And also something that I think the Democrats are starting to realize is going to be a problem for them. And it should. They deserve, and I want to say this right now, the Democrats deserve to lose this upcoming election for the presidency, for control of Congress. The Democrats deserve to be punished at the ballot box for their cowardice, their recklessness, and their stupidity on this issue of law and order, and on their support for the BLM movement and Antifa and all the rest of it. So all of their tears, if Trump wins, they will have earned it. They will have earned that misery. It's not even about how much better I think Trump would be than than Biden. It's about justice, which they don't even understand what that word means. What was it like on the ground in Kenosha last night? Someone's going to join and tell us in a second. Let's bring you a view from right there in the middle of the action on the ground in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Our friend Julio Rosas joins us now from Town Hall, where he's a senior writer. He was there last night and witnessed some of the mayhem, some of the violence, including when the gunfire rang out. Julio, glad you're safe, man. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us, what did you see? I mean, walk us through. Give us your version of the timeline here, starting with the courthouse riots, and then it moved on, and then take us to the shooting. I know you were present and right there. Tell us what happened.
So a crowd started to gather outside the Kenosha County Courthouse around 8:30. It didn't take very long for it to become violent. They were shaking the fence. They were trying to tear it down. That resulted in police and National Guard having to come out to push them away from the fence, and armored trucks were used from the county sheriff's office, and they eventually declared it an unlawful assembly. They used tear gas, pepper balls, rubber bullets, because the crowd was throwing all sorts of projectiles, rocks, bottles, fireworks, and so they finally pushed everyone out of the park. But a lot of people still stayed out in the street, and so they kept just kind of inching their way back.
And where are you during all
down the road?
this?
Right there, right there in the park.
Yeah,
and right there on the street, and so as the rioters were being pushed back, that's when they ran into these armed civilians that have been coming out in recent days to help protect businesses and private property from being burned down or from being looted. And there were some confrontations that were just verbal, but then that probably 5 blocks, 6 blocks down from the county courthouse is where the first shooting took place. And I wasn't present for that one. But when I was running up to the gunshots, that's when I saw the young man in question being chased by the crowd. They were saying that he shot somebody and he tripped and fell. And that's when 2 people jumped on top of him. He got hit in the head with a skateboard. There was a brief fight over control of his rifle. One of the guys that attacked him had a handgun, and he popped off a lot of rounds to get people away from him. He caught one guy in the right arm, and then he was able to eventually get up and walk away. And that's when police, who had been hanging back this entire time, pulled up into the area to help secure it, because there's also other people who were injured.
So just to be very clear here, Julio, so you were there on the scene covering this from the courthouse. It then spills over, let's say 5 or 6 blocks, you said, and there are some confrontations between armed individuals protecting businesses and this mob that was pushed away from the rioters, pushed away from the courthouse. There was a shooting that you did not witness, but I'm assuming you heard, and then it is believed that that somebody that they thought was a shooter in that incident, you saw him. He runs away from the scene of that first shooting, and people accost him, including somebody with a handgun. And then this is the video that I believe a lot of us have seen that's circulating, right? This is the video that where a guy runs up and hits him with a skateboard, and there are a couple, there's kind of a little melee, a grappling that occurs between a few people on the ground, and then you hear a bunch of shots popped off. Were those shots what led to the two fatalities? And you saw this in real time. What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking I had to record what was happening as best as I could, but I also had to get to safety because in the video that I took, you could also hear gunfire erupting from behind me. I don't know where exactly it was, but so it was kind of between a rock and a hard place for a second, because I didn't want to go back any further, because again, I didn't know where the gunshots were coming from.
So the 2 people who were killed, was that from that incident that you saw on the ground?
No. So from my understanding, the gentleman
people were hit
shot,
in that one.
In the head. He got shot in the head, but that was at the car dealership, which was down the road, and that was the scene of the first shooting. The second person that got shot and killed, I believe, was also was at the scene that I witnessed from down the road from the car dealership, and then that third person was hit in the arm.
So the third person hit in the arm, he survived. Somebody else, the person shot in the head, and there's video of that I've seen as well, where I believe it's a reporter from the Daily Caller takes off his shirt and tries to handle the bleeding, but not that person died, even though I believe they got him to the hospital pretty quickly. 2 other shootings there on the ground. What were the exchanges that you saw between the rioters and these armed individuals guarding businesses? Who was the aggressor from what you saw, or how did those unfold? Because I think this is going to be what everyone's asking in the days ahead. Why would these rioters? Why would these rioters believe that they should confront people armed with semi-automatic rifles? It seems beyond belief.
Right, and so the thing you have to keep in mind, there's been this kind of narrative that's kind of emerging saying that there were white supremacists. I personally have not seen any evidence of that, because the people that I've talked to, or the people that are involved in this group that I've talked to, they say that they support the protests. They understand why people are so upset. What happened with Jacob Blake from the information that we know right now about that case, and so the reason why they're there is because they draw the line at destroying businesses and people's livelihoods that had nothing to do with what happened to Jacob Blake. And the whole reason why they felt they had to be out there in the first place was because the police and National Guard, up until that point, were mostly focused on securing the courthouse, where the rest of the town kind of be damned. And so that's kind of what we're seeing. And so in terms of why they were being accosted by the crowd, it's just because they're just viewing them as white people with guns, and they just don't think that that's a good thing. And they were trying to say, hey, we're on your side, but they just weren't really having it.
We're speaking to Julio Rosas. He's a senior writer at townhall.com. He was there last night at the Kenosha riot and even saw one of the exchanges of gunfire that occurred. Julio, we're glad you're safe, man. I mean, that's above and beyond when gunfire like that's ringing out and to be nearby. You obviously got to be very concerned about your own safety, but here you are. That's the good news. Let me ask you, what in that first incident where the man was shot in the head and killed, have you heard from other reporters in the scene, or do you know from people you talked to what is alleged to have happened there?
So prior to the shooting, the cars in that parking lot were being targeted. They were being destroyed. They were in the process of being, and then after the shooting, a car was on fire. And so the rioters have been targeting a lot of these parking lots filled with cars. I mean, a Sunday night we saw that big giant one and actually some survived that night, but then Monday night the rioters set fire to the remaining cars that had survived. So from what we can tell, the gentleman that was involved in the shooting, he was trying to stop people destroying those cars, and there's a video that was taken from across the street where you see him running up, and then someone from behind him throws something that was on fire at him as he was running up into that parking lot. So you can't really see what was happening because a car was kind of in the way of that incident. And so it just kind of remains to be seen if he was being attacked or if he decided to shoot first. We just don't really have answers to those questions right now.
Where were police during all this? You mentioned they were focused on protecting the county courthouse, but I saw Bearcat vehicles in that video where there was the exchange of gunfire that killed at least one person. And then the shooter seemed like he was handing himself in on the video. He walked toward these police vehicles, but I read today that they didn't arrest him, and then now they're looking for him. I don't know if he's going to turn himself in or how that's going to play out. But, I mean, police were doing what while this was all unfolding?
They were just standing behind. I mean, they like I said, they were slowly trying to push people further and further away from the courthouse, and it was kind of weird. So before the shooting, about 2 minutes before the shooting, they were just kind of standstill. It was just kind of a lull and everything. And I was kind of looking around and being like, all right, well, what's next? What's going to happen? And then that's when the shooting started to take place. So there was about 3 to 4 minutes where there was gunfire erupting in multiple places before police in their Bearcat vehicles pulled up, and then I came in through another street, and there were more officers coming. But so there was about 3 or 4 minutes where it was just absolute chaos.
And you did see, Julio, that there were rioters who were armed. Or you mentioned someone had a handgun who went after one of the, I don't know what we call them. People are referring to it as a militia or
civilian.
something, but
Yeah.
armed civilian, yeah. But I guess they're kind of all armed civilians in a sense. But one of the rioters was armed.
Yes, and actually, a photographer who I know, he took a photo of the man who got shot in the arm. He's actually still holding the handgun in his hand, in the arm that he had a huge chunk blown out. And so it was a very, very hairy situation. And and actually, it was fortunate for them because the hospital, the Kenosha hospital, was right across the street from the car dealership.
Julio, glad you're safe, man. Thank you for doing what you do and bringing us some ground truth about what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin last night. Julio Rosas, look for his work at townhall.com. Stay safe, Julio.
Thank you.
You have at the convention the sons of a billionaire who inherited $400 million talking about fear, stirring fear, trying to stir fear among white voters in the suburbs that the blacks are coming to get you. And talking about the fear, making things up, talking about the fear, they're coming for you. They're going to abolish the suburbs. Gangs are coming to your neighborhoods and are going to kill you and your families.
I mean, Joe Scarborough might be the dumbest or the most dishonest person on television now. But he's just backed himself into this corner. He does the bidding of his paymasters at MSNBC. He's a disgrace, right? We won't get into the whole, your co-host and she was married and you were married and the whole thing. I mean, the guy's disgraceful. He is utterly disgraceful. He's a decrepit human being who was a huge Trump booster when he thought it was good for his career. And now, of course, he's turned on him and his viciousness has even exacerbated his stupidity. But making up stories about gangs attacking people, there are videos of gangs attacking people every night. And by the way, it's not about what color anyone in the gang is. They're gangs. There are people who are white who are engaged in these mob attacks. There are people who are black who are engaged in these mob attacks. This is the Democrat mob. But by trying to make it sound like Trump is only talking about, Republicans are only talking about black members of these mobs on the streets, just exacerbating that racial tension, just push that division even more. When this is about ideology, this is not about skin color. But MSNBC, they keep playing. Oh yeah, Joe Scarborough. Can we just talk? Joe Scarborough, this guy is like the super douche from every country club in America. And he's going to lecture people on race relations? Come on. Really? It's unbelievable. Oh, yeah. Oh, he cares so much about minorities. Sure he does. What, from his mansion in Florida? The pandering. These people are such frauds. Such frauds. When was the last time Joe Scarborough spent the night in a majority black neighborhood? I really want to know the answer to that. Of course, you would say, oh, when I was a reporter, I don't mean 30 years ago. When was the last time he did that? Guys, no idea what the heck he's talking about. But he's disgusting. He's a disgusting moron. He's talking about how Trump inherited all this money. What does he think his co-host is so special for? / wife. Oh, is it because she has a fancy last name that opened a lot of doors for her? Otherwise, she's a what? She's a total nothing. She's got nothing to add, nothing to say. just suck up to the right people in the corporate media and have a last name that people know from decades ago in government. But the good news is that, well, for one, we're seeing that this is, you just don't believe Joe Scarborough, believe the videos you see of gangs assaulting officers and people on the street and surrounding them and shouting at them and threatening them and cursing in their faces. And, you know, Joe Scarborough's fine with all that. He doesn't have a bad word to say about that. No problem. None. And then remind yourselves that some Democrats, you know, occasionally, I will say occasionally, Don Lemon, he says the quiet part out loud. He says something that's unintentionally insightful. And this is one of those moments over at CNN. Play clip 3.
I do think that what you said, what's happening in Kenosha, is a Rorschach test for the entire country. And I think this is a blind spot for Democrats. I think Democrats are ignoring this problem or hoping that it will go away. And it's not going to go away. And so, unless someone comes up with a solution over the next 73 days or 70, so however many days.
68 days.
68 days. So it's not going to, the problem is not going to be fixed by then. But guess what? The rioting has to stop. Chris, as you know and I know, it's showing up in the polling. Mm-hmm. It's showing up in focus groups. It is the only thing right now that is sticking. And the Democrats tonight stuck with that, right? And they also stuck with the theme that you said, the coronavirus. You got coronavirus and you have Kenosha.
It's showing up in the polls, he says. Notice how that's the problem. Don Lemon, millionaire. Chris Cuomo, millionaire. They don't give a crap about poor communities or the plight of black men who are struggling in areas where there's not enough jobs, not enough hope, not enough future. They don't care about any of that. They pretend to, because that makes their audience, everyone in the audience gets to feel good about themselves, right? Everyone, in Santa Monica watching CNN from their $2 million condo gets to think, oh yeah, I really care about minorities. That's why I watch CNN. And Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon, they're really good guys. But Don Lemon spoke the truthful part out loud. He said it. The problem here isn't that people are literally dying in the streets over the lies of the BLM movement. That's not the problem for Democrats. That's a problem for normal, moral, rational people. It's that swing voters are starting to see this, and the polling is showing them saying, you Democrats are out of your minds. You guys are crazy. There's something deeply wrong with you. And that's not good if you want to win Ohio and Florida and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Who could have thought that when people told Democrats they had to treat Wisconsin like a battleground, they would take it quite so literally?